My ex-girlfriend refused to take a paternity test and told everyone I'd abandon our baby. But when we ended up in court, I brought one truth to light that completely unraveled her entire lie. This all began about 15 years ago, back when I was wrapping up a contract job on the other side of the state. My girlfriend at the time, Vanessa, we'd been together for 3 years, had already been acting kind of off even before I left. I hadn't been gone that long, just a few weeks, but it was enough time for me to clear my head and start thinking about where a relationship was really headed. To be honest, things between us had been falling apart fast. I'd already made up my mind that I was going to end things with her once I got back. I figured doing it face to face was the right way to go, you know? But the very next day after I got home, she's already blowing up my phone, says she's got something important to tell me and that we need to talk like right away. So I head over to her place, already bracing myself for some kind of drama. She opens the door with this over-the-top cheerfulness, all smiles and excitement, and I immediately get this tight feeling in my stomach, like something's definitely off. And then she drops the bomb. She tells me she's pregnant. I'm not even gonna lie, that hit me hard. I just kind of stood there, stunned, trying to process what she just said. Everything in that moment felt unreal, like my brain needed a second to catch up. But here's where things really started to go sideways. Once I gathered myself, I asked how far along she was, expecting her to say maybe a couple weeks, but instead, she tells me 4 to 7 weeks. Right then, the math started running through my head like wildfire. I've been away for at least 5, maybe 6 weeks, depending on how you counted the days. No matter how I lined it up, the numbers didn't make sense. Still, I tried to keep my cool and asked her if she was absolutely sure about the timeline. Part of me hoped she'd walk it back or say she wasn't exactly sure, but no, she was completely confident, just sat there nodding like she was certain down to the minute. That's when I told her flat out, Vanessa, I've been gone almost 6 weeks. That doesn't line up. She instantly got defensive, like I just accused her of some unforgivable crime. Are you seriously doubting me? She snapped, insisting this was our baby, and that's when it really hit me. She was determined to make me accept this without hesitation. No questions, no hesitation, no room for doubt. But I wasn't about to just roll over and pretend everything made sense, so I kept it calm and told her if she wanted me to be involved, we need 2 things. First, we have to get a paternity test, just to be sure, and second, if the results confirmed I was the father, we'd get lawyers involved to work out custody and financial support. I wasn't trying to be cold or harsh. I just wasn't willing to commit to something that might not even be mine. Well, that was it. She exploded, went from defensive to full-on furious, accused me of insulting her, said I clearly didn't trust her, and kept shouting things like, I can't believe you'd ask me to do this. To her, even asking for a paternity test was like calling her a liar to her face, but I'd had enough of pretending, so I told her plain and simple. If she refused to take the test, then we were done. And here's where it got straight up bizarre. She wouldn't even accept the breakup, like she literally said, I don't accept that, as if she had some kind of veto power over me ending the relationship. I mean, how does that even work? But she just kept pretending like nothing had changed and went on like we were still together. When I finally left her place that day, I hoped she'd calm down and realize I was serious. But that was only the beginning of what turned into a full-blown nightmare. The following weeks felt like something out of a bad soap opera. Vanessa started telling anyone who'd listened that I ditched her while she was pregnant. She reached out to old friends, mutual coworkers, even people I barely knew anymore. Out of nowhere, I'm getting calls from people telling me I needed to step up, saying things like, Tim, man, she's pregnant. You can't just walk away. Every time I tried to share my side of the story, it felt like shouting into the wind. Vanessa had them all convinced she was this poor, abandoned woman left to struggle on her own. Some of my old friends even started offering her money to help out. I know for a fact a few people actually sent her cash. It was like I'd been cast as the villain in this drama. She was directing, and nobody wanted to hear my version. She'd post on social media with these dramatic little sob stories, always hinting at how hard life was, and people just ate it up. I tried to talk to folks one-on-one to clear things up, but it always felt like I was wasting my breath. Even my family started getting dragged into the mess. At one point, I had to get a lawyer involved just to protect myself. I offered to help her out financially, just in case the kid really was mine, but my lawyer warned me that giving her money could be used against me later as an admission of paternity. Basically, if I so much as sent her a single dollar, it could come back to bite me in court. It felt like no matter what I did, I was cornered. Meanwhile, Vanessa never seemed to run out of people willing to believe her. There was this one guy, Tony, who kept pushing me to do the right thing and support her. He seemed convinced it wouldn't hurt me legally. Eventually, I snapped and told him. If you care that much, why don't you support her? That shut him up, but it stung to see how quick people were to take her side over mine. What really got to me were the random run-ins. I'd be out grocery shopping or grabbing lunch, and I'd get these judgmental stares from people who clearly thought they knew the whole story. No matter what I said, no one wanted to hear it. All they saw was a pregnant woman abandoned by her boyfriend, and me, the heartless guy who ran away. I try explaining that there wasn't even proof I was the father, but that only made me look worse, like I was just dodging responsibility. Then, right in the thick of all this drama, Vanessa starts sending me photos, just random snapshots of her with a baby, clearly staged, and always with captions like, "Chloe wants to know where her daddy is." It was obvious what she was trying to do. Guilt tripped me into caving. I didn't respond. I just delete them and try to push it all out of my mind. But the deeper this went, the more I realized I was in way over my head. Looking back now, I can't believe how naive I was. I honestly thought that if I just stayed out of her way, ignored the texts, the stories, the drama, she'd eventually lose interest and move on. But Vanessa wasn't going to let that happen. Letting go? That was never part of her plan. Everywhere I turned, she was still talking, still stirring things up, still dragging my name through the mud. And that was just the warm-up. Things only got messier from there. After I cut things off, she made it her full-time job to keep me tethered to her nonsense. Every couple of months, like clockwork, she'd come up with some new excuse to pull me back in. At first, it was just a few texts, casual, almost innocent stuff like "Chloe smiled for the first time today," like I was part of some newsletter I never subscribed to. I ignored her. Then came more. Just a week or two later, "Chloe misses you," or "It's heartbreaking you're not around for these moments." It was manipulative, no question, but I still tried to convince myself she'd grow tired of it. She didn't. She just kept finding new ways to remind me she was there, that Chloe existed, and that in her eyes I was the villain for staying away. Then she started popping up in person. I'd be out grabbing a bite with friends, and boom, there she was out of nowhere, holding Chloe like she was some kind of trophy, strolling up with a big smile like we were just one happy little family. "Hey," she'd chirp, like it was normal. "Thought you might want to see your daughter." And just like that, everyone around me would go silent, friends giving me the side eye, judging me, wondering if I really was the jerk she'd painted me to be. Vanessa would act all wounded when I didn't fawn over the baby. Like she couldn't wrap her head around why I wasn't thrilled by her ambush. It was humiliating. I finally had enough and talked to my lawyer again. I explained what was happening, how she kept showing up uninvited, texting nonstop, telling everyone Chloe was mine. He suggested going for a restraining order. Even though in my state, unless there was actual violence involved, the best you could get was 2 years at a time. So we filed, and the court granted a temporary restraining order. And I'll be real, even just knowing she legally had to stay away gave me a little breathing room. But didn't last. As soon as those 2 years were up, literally the day the order expired, she was back at it. Same routine, same lines, messages about Chloe missing me, pleas for help, emotional manipulation on full blast. So I had to go back and file again. This became a pattern. Every 2 years, I'd have to relive it, gathering messages, compiling proof, dragging myself back into court just to buy another 24 months of peace. And like clockwork, Vanessa would reappear the second the ink dried on the expiration. Sometimes, she'd even show up at my place with Chloe in her arms, talking through the door like we were a couple going through a rough patch. She'd ramble on about how damaging it was for Chloe not to have her father in her life, then get angry when I refused to let her in. I'd have to walk her off my porch while neighbors peeked through their curtains. The embarrassment alone was brutal. People love gossip, and this was the kind of drama they fed on. The worst incident? That came during a work event. I was at a company dinner, networking, shaking hands, talking to senior staff. When Vanessa showed up with Chloe, she acted like it was a surprise visit, like we were some big happy family reconnecting in front of my boss. I couldn't believe it. She literally pulled me aside mid-conversation and launched into her usual monologue. "Chloe deserves to know her father." I didn't raise my voice, but I made it clear, right in front of people. "Vanessa, take a paternity test, then we'll talk." But instead of backing down, she turned on the tears, full-on waterworks, public meltdown, and everyone around me was staring like I was the monster making a woman cry in front of her child. Afterward, I spent weeks repairing my reputation at work, explaining that no, I wasn't dodging responsibility, and yes, this situation was way more complicated than it looked. Eventually, my lawyer suggested filing again, but this time, we pushed for something more solid. We compiled everything, texts, emails, photos, witness statements. All of it, the pattern was undeniable. The judge granted another order. And while it was still capped at 2 years, this one was more robust, more detailed. It gave me a sliver of peace. But as always, once those 730 days ran out, the cycle started again. Vanessa just couldn't quit. She wasn't just contacting me anymore. Other mutual friends, ex-coworkers, even acquaintances from way back were still hearing about Chloe's dad and how he'd abandoned her. Vanessa was tireless. One friend even called me up one day saying, "Dude, maybe just do the test. What if she's telling the truth?" That stung, not because of what he said, but because it was so clear. No one really cared about my side. Vanessa had crafted a story people wanted to believe, and I was the villain who didn't fight back hard enough to change the narrative. Eventually, I gave up trying to explain myself. I stopped defending, let them think whatever they want. I was done wasting breath. But God, it was exhausting living under that cloud, carrying the weight of someone else's lies, feeling judged by people who didn't know the half of it. Vanessa had this way of pushing buttons that was almost surgical, like clockwork. Every couple of months, I'd get another picture of Chloe, always a perfectly posed one, paired with some guilt-laced caption like "Chloe misses her daddy." I never responded, just deleted them and tried to move on. But Vanessa wasn't clueless. She knew exactly what she was doing. She'd drop one of those messages, go quiet for a little while, then show up somewhere she knew I'd be, like she was testing how much pressure it would take before I snapped. After a while, it felt like she didn't even care about actual support. It was more about control, about keeping me orbiting her drama. No matter what I said, no matter how many restraining orders I managed to get, Vanessa kept worming her way back in, dragging me into this exhausting, twisted cycle she refused to end. At one point, I seriously thought about moving, just packing up and starting over somewhere else. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that wasn't the answer. I shouldn't have to abandon my life just to get her to back off. So I stayed, endured the judgmental stares, the surprise ambushes, the pitying nods from people who only knew her side of the story. I hoped, naively, that she'd eventually run out of steam. But Vanessa? She wasn't getting tired. If anything, she was getting better at it, digging in deeper, finding more subtle, more manipulative ways to keep her grip on me. And every time I dared to believe it was finally over, she'd reappear with a fresh story, a new plea, and always the same angle. Chloe deserves to know her dad. Looking back, I should have known it was never going to just fade out. After years of Vanessa showing up unannounced and demanding attention, I was used to the chaos. But even with all that history, I wasn't prepared for what came next. One day, I'm catching up with an old friend. Ben, we're just hanging out, talking about nothing, and somehow Vanessa's name comes up. Ben was one of the rare people who always believed my version of things, never bought into her guilt-tripping act. So I'm venting about how she still shows up like clockwork every time the restraining order expires, still pushing that same "Chloe is your daughter" line, never agreeing to a DNA test, and out of nowhere, Ben says, "Dude, no joke, I think she pulled the same move on a friend of mine." I blinked. At first, I thought he was messing with me, but Ben was dead serious. He starts telling me about his buddy Dave, who dated Vanessa for a little while. And guess what? Right after he broke things off, she came back claiming she was pregnant and heavily implying he might be the father. I'm just sitting there, floored. All this time, I thought I was her only target. Turns out Vanessa might have been running this same manipulative routine on multiple guys, using Chloe as the bait to hook sympathy and support. It sounded insane, and yet made way too much sense. So I asked Ben to introduce me to Dave. He's down for it, calls him up, fills him in, and an hour later, I'm on a call with this guy who's had an almost identical experience. Dave tells me Vanessa tried the same script on him, but he immediately demanded a paternity test. She refused, and he walked away before things got ugly. Unlike me, he shut it down early, but now we're both wondering, how many guys has she really pulled this with? We started comparing notes, reaching out to mutual acquaintances, people we knew had been connected to her, exes, coworkers, old friends, and the deeper we dug, the more stories surfaced. Vanessa had been busy. We ended up hearing from 2 more guys. One of them, Steve, actually gave her money for a while. Steve told me she'd convinced him that if he really cared about Chloe, he'd help out. She never asked for much, just a couple $100 here and there, and Steve, trying not to feel like a heartless jerk, handed it over, but every time he brought up a paternity test, she'd spin it around, act offended, hurt, like he was calling her a liar. That's how she kept them hooked, small enough requests not to raise alarms, but constant enough to keep a leash on them. So now I'm sitting there with Ben, Dave, and Steve, piecing this all together like some twisted group therapy session. What hit me hardest wasn't just that Vanessa was lying. It was that she'd been doing it so well for so long without anyone realizing. Everyone thought they were dealing with a unique nightmare. But it was the same playbook. She just knew how to adapt the pitch to each guy. None of them had fought back hard because the amounts were small, the interactions spaced out. She flew under the radar, playing the heartbroken mom angle so well that no one stopped to compare stories. Until now. And that's when I knew I had to do something. I brought it all to my lawyer. Every conversation, every message, every guy we'd found, and when I laid it all out, his reaction said it all. He told me this was one of the most bizarre and disturbing cases he'd ever seen, but that if we worked together, we might finally have a shot at stopping her for good. So we filed a formal case. Vanessa got summoned to court, and of course, she played it exactly how you'd expect, denied everything, acted like we were some bitter ex-boyfriend support group trying to ruin her life, but we had records, matching stories, timelines, screenshots, and the court wasn't buying her act anymore. And for once, it felt like maybe we were finally turning the page on this nightmare. My lawyer didn't hold back. He laid it all out. How Vanessa had turned down a paternity test from every single one of us. How she took money from Steve under false pretenses, and how her version of the truth shifted depending on who she was talking to. Under pressure, her mask started slipping fast. The judge finally ordered a paternity test for Chloe. And watching Vanessa's face go ghost white in that moment was something I'll never forget. For the first time, she wasn't calling the shots anymore. And she knew it. She tried to push back, arguing that the test was unnecessary, that it was disrespectful, but the judge wasn't budging. We all agreed to take the test. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could maybe breathe again. Maybe the nightmare was almost over. I left the courthouse that day with this strange cocktail of emotions. Part of me was angry, furious even, but mixed in was this quiet, stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, the madness was about to end. What really got under my skin was how close she'd come to getting away with all of it. If Ben hadn't mentioned that conversation, I never would have known there were other guys out there who'd been played the same way. She could have kept running this game, dragging in new men, reusing the same fake story about Chloe's dad and bleeding them for sympathy and money. She had it down to a science. Just enough pressure to make you feel responsible, but never enough to trigger alarm bells. And in the middle of it all, there was Chloe, a kid, completely innocent, being used as a pawn in Vanessa's long con. She had no idea who her real father was, if she even had one involved at all, and I couldn't help wondering what kind of damage that would do to her long term. Still, that wasn't something I could fix. My only focus was making sure Vanessa never roped me, or anyone else, into her circus again. So when court day came around, the weight of it hit me hard. After all the years of showing up uninvited, the guilt trips, the manipulations, this was it. We were all finally in the same room. We'd spent months preparing, pooling everything we had, messages, timelines, notes from the past, sitting there with the others. I realized just how surreal it all was. A bunch of men who barely knew each other, brought together because we'd all been conned by the same woman. It was something out of bad drama, except this was real life, and Vanessa had directed every scene. She walked into that courtroom like she was walking into a casual lunch date, flashing smiles, and even giving a wave to one of the guys she'd been squeezing for cash. Classic Vanessa, always playing it cool, always acting like the victim of some massive misunderstanding. Then the hearing began, and just like clockwork, she launched into her usual performance. How she was a struggling mom doing the best she could. How she only ever wanted what was best for Chloe. She spun her little narrative like she was auditioning for a Lifetime movie. But this time, nobody was buying it, least of all the judge. You could see it on his face. He wasn't moved. My lawyer started with my case, walking through the entire saga. Vanessa's refusal to take a test, the endless emotional manipulation, the photos with captions like Chloe misses her daddy, sent just often enough to sting. Every time I tried to draw a line, she'd find a way to step over it, dangling guilt and obligation in front of me like bait. And then came the others, one by one. The guys stood up and shared their experiences, and sure enough, every story followed the same blueprint. Vanessa would show up, announce a pregnancy, insist they were the father, then dodge any request for proof. Meanwhile, she'd milk them for support, often just small amounts, so it wouldn't raise suspicion. The judge listened closely. Vanessa's lawyer tried to spin it, saying we were all misreading things, that this was just a series of unfortunate misunderstandings between a woman trying to do right by her daughter and some angry men. But our stories matched too closely. Same language, same tactics, same manipulation. Even the judge couldn't hide his disbelief. When it was Vanessa's turn to speak, the judge didn't let her off easy. He looked her dead in the eye and asked why she turned down paternity tests from every single man she claimed was Chloe's father. He asked why her stories didn't line up, why she kept using the same lines and avoiding proof. You could see the color drain from her face. She stumbled through some half-hearted explanation about feeling insulted, saying a mother's word should be enough, and how she only wanted to protect Chloe. But it was weak. She looked like someone who'd built her house of lies on sand and was finally watching the tide roll in. Then my lawyer cut in again. He reminded the court how Steve had given her money for years based on her word alone. Believing he was doing the right thing, he talked about how Vanessa had kept Chloe away from real family connections just to maintain this illusion, to keep the scam going without getting caught. You could see it happening in real time. Vanessa shrinking under every word, that smug little smile fading until all that was left was this look of panic, like a cornered animal finally realizing the trap had snapped shut. Then the judge laid it out. A mandatory paternity test, no more arguments, no more stalling. Vanessa immediately pushed back, saying again how humiliating and insulting it all was. She even turned to the judge with these fake tears in her eyes and said, "I just don't understand why they're doing this to me." But the judge wasn't having any of it. He told her it wasn't just about us anymore. It was for Chloe, so the girl could finally know who her real father was without lies, without manipulation, just the truth. And that shut her up. Vanessa went completely silent. You could see in her eyes. She knew the jig was up. I just sat there, watching her fold in on herself, and all I felt was this weird cocktail of disgust and relief. She tried so hard to paint us as the villains, tried to spin this soap opera where she was some poor, misunderstood mother, but now she was just another liar caught in her own mess. When the hearing ended and everyone started filing out, she didn't look at a single one of us. No excuses, no fake apologies, not even a glance. She kept her eyes down like she finally understood there was no performance left that anyone was buying. And for the first time in what felt like forever, it was quiet, really quiet. No more texts out of nowhere, no more guilt trips or pop-up drama. Just the silence of something finally ending. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping out of years-long fog. I've been stuck in her web so long, I didn't even remember what peace felt like, but now I could breathe. The rest of US didn't say much as we left. We just gave each other these tired nods. Like people who just come out of the same storm and somehow live to talk about it. There wasn't a need for big speeches. We all knew we'd made it to the end of our game. All that was left now was the test. Waiting for those results was brutal. Even though deep down I was sure Chloe wasn't mine, there's always that tiny part of your brain that whispers, what if? What if she'd been telling the truth this whole time and I'd just been too angry to see it? But when my lawyer finally called, I was at work, and I'll never forget how my heart started racing. He said the results were in, solid, no gray areas. I ducked into a hallway and asked him flat out, am I the father or not? And just like that, he said the words I'd waited years to hear. You're not the father. I didn't cry or cheer. I just stood there, staring at the floor, letting that weight roll off me like a boulder I didn't even know I'd been carrying. It was over. I could finally move on. Yeah, I was still angry. Angry that Vanessa had dragged me through years of this mess, had made me question myself, had made me out to be the bad guy in her carefully crafted story. But more than anything, I was just done. I was free. After I got off the phone, I sent a message to the other guys. It's official. We're all clear. Next thing I knew, we were on a group call, not celebrating so much as decompressing. It wasn't high fives and champagne. It was quiet, like survivors sitting in the aftermath of something nobody else would ever quite understand. We'd been used, lied to, manipulated, but we'd made it out. Vanessa, though, not so much. She lost it when she got the results. The next morning, she showed up at my house, screaming on my front lawn like I'd ruined her entire life. She was shouting that I was a coward, that I'd turned Chloe against her, that I destroyed everything. The neighbors all came out. I didn't say a word, just watched from the window as she unraveled in front of everyone. Then the cops arrived and hauled her off. Again, she'd violated the restraining order for the last time. And this time, she actually got arrested. I wasn't happy about it, but I wasn't sorry either. Mostly, I just kept thinking about Chloe. That poor girl had grown up inside this elaborate fiction, never even knowing it was a lie. And what kind of damage does that do to a kid? But then something unexpected happened. My lawyer reached out and said someone had contacted him. Chloe's great-grandmother, Rose, she wanted to apologize, said she'd had no idea what Vanessa had been up to, that she believed every word because she thought she was just helping a struggling single mom. But now that she knew the truth, she'd cut Vanessa off and taken Chloe and herself. I didn't know much about Rose, but from what I heard, she was stable, grounded, the complete opposite of Vanessa. And honestly, that might have been the best thing that ever happened to Chloe. Along with the apology, Rose asked if I'd be willing to read something Chloe had written. A letter, just one letter, I agreed, and the first line hit me like a punch to the chest. To the man I thought was my dad. She told me about all the things Vanessa had said over the years, how I was too busy to care, how I didn't want her, how I didn't love her, that I'd walked away. And all I could think was, she really believed that. Her whole life, she believed that. She said she'd asked Vanessa over and over why I never visited, why I didn't come around, and every time, Vanessa told her the same thing, that I didn't want to be part of family. The deeper I got into the letter, the more I felt this strange swirl of guilt and anger. I had no idea Chloe had been carrying all of that. She was just a kid, trapped in the middle of a lie she never asked to be part of, and as much as I wished I could somehow fix it all for her, I knew it wasn't my place to step in. Toward the end of the letter, Chloe said she was sorry about how everything turned out, and she even asked me to forgive her. That absolutely wrecked me. This girl, who'd done nothing wrong, was apologizing to me for a situation that was never hers to begin with. She'd been fed a false story her whole life, and now she was left to deal with the pieces. And yeah, I felt awful for her, but stepping into her life at that point wouldn't have helped. This was a mess her mother had created, and now it was on Vanessa, and maybe Rose, to help Chloe sort through it. The aftermath hit hard, especially for Vanessa. With her own family stepping away and Rose cutting off support, she didn't have anyone left to lean on. And honestly, a small part of me felt a little sympathy for her. But mostly, I felt relief she couldn't manipulate anyone else the way she did us. Not anymore. She was finally paying the price for years of deception. Maybe now she'd think twice before dragging someone else in her web. As for me, I felt peace. The whole ordeal had been a roller coaster, but at least now the truth was out. I could finally move forward without constantly questioning myself, without that lingering what if hanging over me. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was really free. This experience taught me a lot about people, about trust, and just how far someone will go to keep their version of the story alive. It left a few scars, sure, but it also brought closure. I knew I wasn't Chloe's father, and while I still felt for her, I also knew I'd done everything I could to handle the situation with integrity. Sometimes that's all you can do. So yeah, I was done with Vanessa, done with courtrooms and the endless drama. I was finally moving on, and this time I wasn't looking back. But then came the update. All right, so I thought this story had finally wrapped itself up. I really did, but as it turns out, life had one more twist waiting. After everything, the test, the courtroom chaos, and Vanessa's meltdown, I thought the chapter was closed for good. But about a month ago, I got a message from Chloe out of the blue. She wasn't angry, and it wasn't about the past. She said she'd been doing a lot of thinking, and now that the truth was out, she wanted to track down her real father. And here's the curveball. She was hoping I could help her. At first, I didn't know what to say. I was hesitant. The last thing I wanted was to invite more chaos into my life, especially with Vanessa lurking in the shadows somewhere. But Chloe wasn't her mother. There was something honest in the way she reached out. You could tell she just wanted answers. Nothing more. So after going back and forth for a bit, I agreed. I figured if I could help her avoid the same pain and confusion we all went through, it might be worth it. We started simple. Chloe had a few of Vanessa's old keepsakes. Some pictures, a couple letters, just fragments really, but maybe, just maybe, they held some clues. We sifted through everything together, piecing timelines and names, trying to match them to whoever Vanessa might have been seeing when she got pregnant. Honestly, it felt surreal. I was helping Chloe uncover a part of her life her mom had buried, and in the process, I was learning more about her too. One photo really stood out. It was an old Polaroid, faded, a little curled at the edges, of Vanessa with some guy neither of us had ever heard her mention. No date, no name scribbled on the back. Just the two of them smiling on some beach somewhere, but there was something about it that just felt important. Chloe remembered her mom briefly mentioning a boyfriend she had right before she met me. Someone she never brought up again after they broke up. Wasn't much, but it gave us a direction to chase. With a little online digging and some decent detective work, we finally found him. His name was Julian. We stumbled across his old social media profile. Barely active, nothing flashy, but it was definitely him. Chloe took a deep breath and reached out. I could tell she was equal parts hopeful and terrified. This guy might actually be her father, the man she'd spent her whole life wondering about. The wait after she messaged him was brutal. She tried to play it cool, but I could see it in her eyes. She was guarding herself against another letdown. A few days later, Julian replied. He was surprised, shocked really, but he agreed to meet and hear Chloe out, and when she asked me to come with her for support, I was a little caught off guard. I wasn't her dad. I wasn't even sure where I fit into all of this, but I saw how much calmer she felt knowing I'd be there. So of course I went. Meeting Julian in person was something. He was older now, sure, but he had this kind, easygoing vibe that put Chloe at ease right away. He sat and listened while she told him everything. How she was raised, all the lies, the recent court mess. You could see it was a lot for him to take in, especially hearing how Vanessa had twisted the truth for so long. But there was a look in his eyes, a kind of quiet determination, that told me he was ready to step up if he really was her father. After that meeting, Julian agreed to a DNA test. And let me tell you, waiting for those results was a whole different level of nerve-wracking. Chloe kept herself busy, but every time we talked, I could see that nervous energy in her, like she was bracing for another heartbreak. Then the results came in. Julian was her dad. I'll never forget Chloe's face when she found out. It was this incredible mix of shock, joy, and pure relief. After all those years of not knowing, she finally had her answer. For the first time, she had a real connection to someone that didn't come with lies or expectations. Julian looked just as overwhelmed as she did, but he reached out, took her hand, and told her he was there, that he wanted to make up for everything they'd missed. Since then, they've been getting to know each other, slowly, but steadily. Chloe told me he's been doing everything he can to welcome her into his life. They're even planning a trip together. Just the two of them, sometime to catch up on the years they lost. I won't lie, it feels strange watching from the sidelines. I helped her find her real dad, and now that she has him, I'm not really part of the picture anymore. But honestly, that's okay. Seeing her find peace, watching her step into something real, that makes it all worth it. As for Vanessa, well, word eventually got back to her about the test. From what I've heard, she's not taking it well. She's been throwing out wild accusations that the results were faked or that Chloe's been manipulated by me and Julian, but no one's buying it. Even her own family has stopped entertaining her drama. It's like the fog finally lifted and people are seeing just how deep her lies really ran, and they're done enabling it. As for me, I'm good. I thought this story would end with me walking away for good, but it feels better knowing Chloe got the answers she needed. Helping her find her father was the right call. Our paths might not cross much going forward, but I know she's going to be all right. She's got the truth now. She's got her real family. And most importantly, she's finally free from the weight of all those lies.